Mike Pompeo was elected to the 112th Congress last November from Kansas. He won a five-way Republican primary, even though he had never held elective office before. He serves on the Energy and Commerce Committee, which oversees federal law and policy relating to health care, telecommunications, energy, and trade issues. Welcome, Congressman Pompeo.
It's great to be here, Mallory. Thank you.
You recently penned an op-ed with Congressman Jeff Flake. After a decade of green energy rhetoric, you said that there was going to be some real problems with this green energy movement in that. Did the Solyndra debacle push that even forward more?
I'm convinced that it has. Americans need to know that when the federal government gets in the way, when it takes your taxpayer dollars to finance this energy, things like Solyndra are just inevitably going to happen. We've tried to create solar and wind and all these great next technologies with taxpayer money for decades, and you can see they're all failures. The energies that succeed are those that customers want and can afford to pay for, not those that those of us in Washington, D.C. deem somehow healthier, cleaner, or greener.
Congressman, you're from Kansas. I mean, you grow a lot of corn in Kansas. Ethanol is not all that free market, and you're for free market solutions. How are you going to stay in office if you're not going to support ethanol?
You do it by being honest with people. The ethanol folks in my district are hardworking, creative, great business people. I am convinced that when we get the federal government out of their way and we get EPA out of the way of our farmers who are growing corn, that ethanol will have a fighting chance to compete just like all the other great creative energy technologies that are out there. Some smart American will find American technology for American consumers. We won't in Washington, D.C.
Won't it hurt some of these ethanol companies?
Sure, in the short run, undoubtedly it'll impact their business model. But they've made a long way towards making ethanol more competitive. Now they need to cross through, just like wind, just like solar. I said on the Energy and Commerce Committee, I have had 12 different energy sources come to my office and tell me they're the solution for the next generation. I'm not smart enough to pick which one of those 12 it's going to be, and I'm sure not smart enough to do it with your money.
You've linked national security to energy policy. That's correct, isn't it?
It is true.
Well, shouldn't you be pushing some of these solutions to energy?
You know, it's kind of funny, Mallory. Folks will come in and say, you know, we need to import less oil from those bad people who want to do us harm in the Middle East. And who could disagree with that? I think that's true.
Then how can you leave it to the free market?
The fact that OPEC has a cartel is something that they point to. But if they've got such a cartel, that ought to make their products more competitive here in the United States. That is, if there's cartel that's mispricing oil, it ought to allow solar or wind or algae or nuclear, all of those energies to compete under the umbrella that OPEC creates with their artificially high pricing. Look, the market will provide a response. The American people are very price sensitive when it comes to energy. You can see it in Kansas. In Kansas, we now have a mandate to have 20% of our energy from renewable sources. That'll end up being mostly wind. And the downside is that means every family in Kansas will have a higher electric bill, and every company thinking about creating jobs in Kansas will have to think about what the cost of their electricity is going to be. It's the wrong approach to having affordable, cheap American energy.
Let's talk about the EPA for a moment, the Environmental Protection Agency. How does that affect Kansas, some of the regulations? Can you give me some specifics?
I can give you some real specifics.
You've been outspoken on this.
I've been very outspoken about the EPA's total lack of consideration for job creation and wealth creation, which are frankly the things that really create health in America, right? A wealthy population is almost always a much healthier population, and they give it no credit. EPA is trying to regulate dust behind farm trucks. In Kansas, we had a summer where we had 62 straight days, 100 degrees or more. And the EPA says if you drive a truck down a road and it creates dust, that's particulate matter, and we want to regulate it. They've been trying to regulate our dairy producers by saying that if you spill milk over a boundary, that we need to treat that the same way you would treat a hazardous spill of chemicals or toxics or oil. These are the kind of things the common sense folks in Kansas say, surely you're kidding me. And yet we've got a federal government today that wants to try and make it more expensive, more costly, and in some cases prohibitive to carry on those traditional Kansas tasks that feed the world.
What specific companies do you think the EPA is hurting in your district?
Oh, they're hurting.
Or outside your district?
You bet. They're hurting all of our agricultural businesses, which would range from big farm producers and like Cargill to little small family farms that are down in Wellington or Winfield or out in Kingman County. Every one of those producers know that the EPA is out to find a reason to make their life more difficult.
When you say hurting them, you mean it's costing them money?
Yep, it drives.
It's raising their prices.
Yeah.
Can you go into a little more detail?
It drives their costs up. I'll give you another perfect example. So the EPA now is working on trying to stop natural gas drilling because they're concerned about the risk of hydraulic fracturing. Well, we do a lot of natural gas production in Kansas, and we consume a lot of natural gas not only directly, but through our fertilizer costs. It's the primary component for the cost of fertilizer, which is an incredibly big cost component for our agricultural community. So to the extent EPA is successful at reducing drilling for natural gas in America, our farmers will pay more money for their products. We'll, as a result, import more of those products from overseas. We'll have fewer jobs, higher cost food, and lower quality food as well.
You quoted Admiral Mike Mullen in your op-ed with Jeff Flake. You said that a threat to national security, one of the major threats, is the deficit. How would you cut the deficit? Where are you going to cut?
You know, I was a soldier for 6 years after I graduated from West Point, and make no mistake about it, our Department of Defense spends money in ways that you and I would pull our hair out if we knew the details. But the very first task of the federal government is national security. The place we need to go is twofold. You solve the deficit through growth. So that's a set of tax policies and regulatory policies that encourage job creation and capital investment in America. And the second place we've got to do is we've got to reform our entitlement programs. And you know, there's no quicker way to become a former congressman than to talk about Medicare or Social Security. But there's no quicker way to destroy a nation if we don't make sure that those programs are around for my son and, if I'm blessed, our grandkids. So we've got to get serious about tackling Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid if we have any hope of leaving America the way we want it to be for the next generation.
Congressman, I'm going to pin you down. What would you specifically cut?
So I would reform Social Security by increasing the eligibility age. We would begin to look at means testing as a serious piece of the reform, and we would look at the cost of living calculation. For Medicare, it's pretty clear. I supported Paul Ryan's plan for Medicare. I would introduce competition into the government purchase healthcare systems, both Medicare and Medicaid, and I would give the states tremendous flexibility in how to use their Medicaid dollars. I'd be happy to provide almost unlimited ability for our really talented governors all across this country to serve the needy healthcare recipients in their state without directives and details and an incredible bureaucracy from Washington, D.C. There's a couple agencies I'd get rid of too. There's a long list of things.
Couple agencies, what are they?
Sure, so I'm going to submit a piece of legislation next week to get rid of an agency you've never heard of called the Economic Development Agency. It's got an Undersecretary of Commerce. It's nothing more than wealth transfer. It gives grants to companies that assertedly need a couple $1 million to finish off their program. It's nothing more than $350 million a year worth of earmarks coming out of the Department of Commerce.
Can you name some of the companies offhand?
Sure. So there's companies. There's a business in Newton that received a grant. Kansas's universities received some of that money. Indeed, when you go look at EDA's list, you'll find that there are some in every district in America. That shouldn't come as any surprise. It's a political creature designed to take care of itself. I would also take our Department of Education and dismantle it. We don't need me and the 435 colleagues of mine who in good faith try and distribute federal educational funds and do tremendous harm to children all across the country. Leave that money down for parents and teachers and school districts. They'll do a much better job educating the next generation than we can.
Deficit. You voted for raising the federal limit.
I did. I voted to increase the debt ceiling. I did it for 3 reasons. The first was we got $2.5 trillion of spending reductions.
Well, we don't have them yet.
Well, we don't. We have a commitment. We have the cuts on paper, and we have caps, much like the original bill I voted for, cut, cap, and balance. They're only as good as the American people, as the folks the American people elect. We can absolutely undo them in year 1 or 2 or 3. I hope that in November we elect a cast of characters who are prepared to do even more. But we weren't going to get any further, in my view, during that very heated negotiation. We have a president from 2008 and a Senate from 2006, and we have the duty to make the case for the next 14 months about why we're right, why smaller federal government at every nook, in every nook and cranny is the right solution for freedom and liberty across America. And that's the fight we're going to have for the next 14 months.
You brought up the 2012 race.
Yes, sir.
On the Republican side, who are you favoring?
I don't have anybody that I've announced that I'm for yet. I will tell you that today, the first thing I want to make sure is we find a candidate that is going to fulfill the conservative commitment.
Who is that candidate?
I've seen Governor Perry, who is impressive to me. I've seen Governor Romney say things that I like as well.
But he's the father of Obamacare. Obamacare Light.
I don't like what he did in Massachusetts one iota. Indeed, we were living with a discussion with Governor Patrick in Massachusetts about health care the other day. It's definitely regrettable that he went down that road. I like Governor Romney's position on immigration more than I like Governor Perry, so I'm still listening and learning and trying to make sure we get to the right place. I'll say this. The most critical thing we can do is find the most conservative candidate we can that can put this president out of office. It's an absolute imperative for America.
One thing that you would do immediately to create more jobs, what would it be?
Undo Obamacare.
Congressman Mike Pompeo, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much, Mally.
Please come back soon.
I'll absolutely do that.